Network. The Grueling Truth is powered by betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for finding the online casino or sports book that's right for you. So make sure you check out betting.net. I'm your host for the Legends of College Football show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in our guest, former head football coach at the University of Cincinnati, defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, and really, Coach, if I read every place you coached, it would probably take 30 minutes. But that's the interesting thing about you, and that's where most football coaches are. And it's an honor to have you on the show today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Mike, and hello to all the people out there that can be following us, that particularly are Bearcat fans or Ball State fans or Notre Dame fans, UK fans. I mean, like you say, I've coached at all those places, Indiana States, Marshall, all up there in that cluster of locations. It was a pleasure and fun to be in that part of the country.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit of start. You were born in Texas.
Yes.
From when I get here, you went to Henderson State. You want to talk a little bit about Texas and Texas high school football when you were playing in the late 60s, early 70s?
Early 70s. Don't put me in the grave too quick. But no, I played at a high school called Texas High. It's a twin city in Texarkana, half on one side of the city of Texarkana, the other half in Arkansas. So you get that little bit of a naturally born Texas-Arkansas rivalry. You know, I'm talking about on the university level. Then you kind of certainly have it on an everyday basis in the city, Arkansas High, appropriately named, Texas High, appropriately named. But I played there, 70, 71, 72. We had some good players come through there. My senior class started off good, wasn't great, but I enjoyed that style of football. You knew right then a little bit about Friday Night Lights long before it became famous, if you will, because football is so important to the people in the state of Texas. Not slighting any other state by any means, but it is a passion in the South, and in particular in the state of Texas. And that movie that got portrayed, Friday Night Lights, is very true. It's life and death sometimes, not to take it too seriously, but I enjoy being raised in Texas. And it's ironically, Mike, I went all the way through in schools in Texas, went into coaching, always kind of said, well, someday I'll just go back to Texas and coach, because that is the place to coach. I thought back then. Never have coached in Texas, just never had the opportunity. I've had other opportunities, but not that one. And I've coached against teams in Texas. As I got to become a head coach, Conference USA took us down there, of course, a number of times. But I was a walk-on football player. Nothing. I made all conference in Texas, 14-4A. That was the biggest division. So I thought I was good. I mean, until I became a coach, I knew I wasn't very good. But I walked on at Henderson State University, earned a scholarship. And that's kind of really where I began to formulate my desire, my will to coach, and the people that we came in contact with there. And so anyway, I played for a legendary coach named Sporty Carpenter, and we won all the time. I mean, we were like 39-6 my 4 years as an active player. I stayed on a fifth year and became a grad assistant coach, went another 8-3, something like that. So winning was in the blood. High school was used to winning. College football was used to winning. And then my first job became Arkansas's grad assistant under Lou Holtz.
Yeah, that was a great time to be Lou Holtz's assistant at Arkansas, too. He turned around William and Mary, and then he goes to Arkansas. And the year you were there, I think they were 9-2-1.
The thing about Lou, and I love the man to death. I owe him a lot. He is my ultimate mentor, even though we don't speak as often as we used to. He's one of the best program builders of all time. Certainly, I tried to take some of those tools with me to Cincinnati. But he's a builder. He's not necessarily as good a sustainer. And that happens to coaches sometimes. They get invigorated with the new challenge. He works his magic, sometimes literally, gets the kids to believe and discipline and rise above perhaps their current existent self-esteem level. Every school, 6 of them, he took to bowl games inside the second year. There's no other coach ever come close to that record. And so I was proud to be a part of him. Even then, I mean, I was the young, spongy grad assistant working for Monty Kiffin, Lane Kiffin's father. Some people don't know all that. Lou Holtz, other guys that went on to become really good. And I replaced, ironically, the GA that left Arkansas that opened up the spot for me was none other than Pete Carroll, currently of Seattle. And so we all go back to the Arkansas roots of the Arkansas defense, the Monty Kiffin defense. I then went to La Tech with an Arkansas assistant, installed the Monty Kiffin defense. Here I am, 23, 24, telling these 45, 50-year-olds, and at that time I thought those guys were old, of course. And we installed the Monty Kiffin defense at Louisiana Tech. We got fired after 1 year due to some odd circumstances. Then I reunited with Monty over at NC State, and no less than Pete Carroll was the defensive coordinator. Pete's 3 years older, and we had a tremendous staff over there. So, that first getting started in my career, I was around really good people. I was very fortunate and blessed to know those guys. A lot of times your connections is what gets you. You stand on someone else's shoulders until you can swim on your own a little bit. And but I enjoyed every stop of the way. There's more journeys than that, but that got me up to NC State. Stayed for 3 years. Then we all got fired. That's when Monty Kiffin entered the NFL in '83. Pete Carroll a year later in '84. I sat out of coaching for 1 year in Little Rock, working for Merrill Lynch. Got back into it at New Mexico State, and then got to the Midwest. And the reason I break it right there is, I was raised a Southerner, even I went to NC State, that's in the South. But I then went into the Midwest, first time ever, and worked at Ball State for 7 years. And like a lot of guys, you feel like you're getting stuck a little bit, kind of, you're wanting to be mobile, and you're on that upward, spiral of college coaching. You were named one of those rising stars in the game, and it finally happened in the 8th year being in Indiana that I got hired by Lou at Notre Dame. So everything kind of went full circle.
Yeah, what's it like to coach at Notre Dame? I know that sounds like a fanboy question, but I've covered some games there, and that place is special just when you walk onto campus on a fall Saturday afternoon.
I think probably 80% of the opponents are defeated just driving on campus and walking into the stadium. I know back in those days when we were really good. Lou had a great run there from '88 all the way up almost to his end. I was part of that, 92, 93. We had an excellent team. And we won 17, 18 games in a row at one point, even though we didn't marry that up well enough to ever win a national title. We really got screwed, we thought, in the 93 team. It was outstanding. Rick Meyer of Indiana was from Goshen, Indiana, was the quarterback. We had a lot of number one picks on that team, 92, 93. And we played Florida State in what they called the game of the century at that particular time in late November of 93. We won the game. Ultimately, we lost the battle, so to speak, because we were ranked number one for a week. And then all of a sudden we get beat by BC. Same week, Florida State puts about a 60 spot on NC State. And then we play Texas A&M as a repeat game of 92's Cotton Bowl. We played in 93's Cotton Bowl. And we kind of held serve. And Florida State held serve. They held off a hard-charging Nebraska team that was undefeated. So they beat Nebraska, which had to happen. But they won close. And unfortunately, we won close in Dallas against A&M. It wasn't enough to push the voters. I really thought the polls, AP, the press loved Bobby Bowden, the good old boy, rest his soul now. Bobby was a great man. And they gave him the title. But we thought the coaches poll, and we would have been satisfied with the split title. The coaches put themselves in our shoes. We have one loss, and it's to Florida State that we beat. You would think the coaches would vote for us, but they did not. And I really learned right then that was a vendetta against Notre Dame, not to empower them. And it was a vendetta against Lou a little bit. Lou doesn't have a ton of friends in the business. He's well respected in the business, but he's a loner. And so these guys those voters, because I can't see today any coach that would say Notre Dame beat them head to head, wouldn't be the first tiebreaker, so to speak, of where your vote would be casted. And but we were disappointed. But coming out of that, I got the Cincinnati job. And
was there any trepidation? Because Cincinnati, as a program, especially from like 1985 to the early 1990s, I mean, in 1984, I don't think people realized they were actually, or 1983, I think they were relegated to Division I AA for a year. And that's the year that they upset Penn State. They got reinstated in 1984. But there was a lot of people that thought the program should be dropped down a level or two.
I tell you what, Mike, when I got the job in '94, either that first year or at least into the second, I attended, this is the God's truth. It's not that way today, obviously, but I attended a forum open to all faculty and staff. I just kind of sat in the back of the room. It shows you how obscure I was as a known figure, now the new head football coach at UC. And I listened to faculty members argue over whether or not UC should even keep football. I don't care about what level. They did, half of them didn't even want to keep football. And it happens in a wide, diverse, populated faculty staff. It's a very progressive area in so many ways. But they were saying because we can't, meet our bills and the athletic department's in the hole, and they just looked at it from one set of eyes. And I walked out of there saying, man, we got a heck of a chore ahead of us, not just building the team, getting it going, trying to make our fans that are supportive of us happy. We might not even last our own faculty and staff. And so that was an eye-opening experience right there. It didn't deter my enthusiasm. Back to your question, why did I take the job? Basically, I was out of Notre Dame. I was a divorced father of two, Jesse and Josh, now full-grown men. And they were living in Muncie, and I was living in South Bend. And when this Cincinnati job came open, it was really as much about location. 2 hours away from my children, I could still be get my dream of being a head job, build a program rather than just take over a program. Maybe a little bit naive in the job search. All I know was when we lost that Boston College game, and I just kind of felt it, and I know the history of Coach Holtz. Had I come back the next year and said, okay, let's build on this, and went 6-5 as they did do following the '93 team, went 6-5, very dropped off talented team, I would have been the scapegoat. I mean, I've been there, done that. So I said, I felt like I had to get out of there while the getting was good and I could get a head job. I looked into South Carolina. Brad Scott got it. Looked into Missouri. Larry Smith got it. But I got the UC job, and it turns out that it was a great move for me. We built that program, and really over the 10 years, we built it into the position of being invited to a bigger dance. And that's when the Big East came along. And my only regret about having been let go at UC was just not getting to coach in the Big East for a little bit of time, just to see what we could do. When you hang that new banner, just as they're going to do right now, that Big 12 banner waves big. It's going to open up so many doors and avenues and money and revenue streams. I was looking forward to that being in the Big East, because the announcement came in October 1st of '03, and then a couple of months later or less, I was fired. And I think really going into that league, Mike, was why Bob fired me, Bob Goen, because he saw the opportunity for a new face, a new voice. And I didn't, now as I look back on it, did they make a good choice? Heck yeah, look at where they are today. They've hired some tremendous coaches through there. They've done a great job outside of Tommy Tuberville, who really failed there, but now, of course, is Senator Tuberville. But outside of Tommy, every one of them benefited themselves and the program by taking it a little bit higher, a little bit better, no more than Brian Kelly did, of course. And they got him the Notre Dame job. D'Antonio got the Michigan State job. Butch Jones got the Tennessee job. Tommy got Congress. And but that's what the job is. Luke now has done what anybody else has never been able to do. I was trying to make it happen, but that's make it a destination stop. It's always been a temporary stop or a stopover in your career if you had an opportunity. Head coaches either left early or got fired. Assistants came, stayed, got better jobs, as I hired 50 guys, the likes of Tomlin and Harbaugh and Rex Ryan and all these notable guys. There was tons of other really, really good assistants who other people wanted that they've not taken from UC now. I mean, Luke's got his own guys. He has lost a few. He and I have talked about it. I looked at it always as the opportunity to get better when you lost somebody. And I think he's done the same thing. I think bringing Mike Tressel on board now is a perfect answer to losing Marcus Freeman, So anyway, you go ahead and ask me the questions. Otherwise, I could talk here forever.
Well, I mean, the big question to me is when you go to a place like Cincinnati, especially you on the ground floor, how do you change the culture? And what culture are you looking to instill to really change everything? Especially when you talked about there were so many faculty even against you. How
Yeah.
do you start to build this culture?
Well, to be honest, the press didn't really help us all that much when I tried to sit down. What I did for 10 years is try to educate the press. I mean, just bring them into the office every Monday and just talk. But, I always said to them, I said, if you're a high school senior waking up in the city of Cincinnati, do you believe that you live in the town of a major college football program? And I always found the answer to be no, they don't. It's not that way now. I mean, it's really, really turned, and all the coaches since and those that made it better deserve that credit. But I was trying to educate the press of how this thing should be done, how it should look, and what do we need from their part to try. And of course, what they would say is, "Hey, coach, we need people to win too, for we can cover a positive program." So I ended up being the winningest coach, total wins, if you will, 10 years, and the losingest coach over 10 years. So it's kind of, my good years were not great and my bad years were terrible. I had some 2 wins and 3 win type years, and then we had 6 and 7 and 8 win seasons. So we didn't ever top out as that hot guy that would move on to get another job, which all of them did up until Luke Fickell. And but it was a tough sale. But as far as the culture we were trying to build, we were going to be student athletes to the hilt. I mean, I believe truly in the values of getting a quality education, and you can do that at Cincinnati. Our graduation ratios were way up there, higher than most anybody had ever imagined it would be by the time we left. We talked about life after college and preparation, but while there, we were going to build an atmosphere that was going to be based on toughness and physicality and discipline and doing the little things right. We're going to try to recruit, if we could, a good 3 to 5 hour circle, and then go to other places as a spot place. And initially, the people we hired had expertise in Florida and some other located states. And Cincinnati, by being an independent all those years, did have success down there in Florida. And we were kind of a hodgepodge roster my first 5 to 6 years. And as we turned the corner, got into the bowl game, and then really got it going, we recruited as much locally as probably any of them have ever enjoyed. I remember one year, I forget the exact year, whether it be 2000 team, 2001 team, something like that. Our entire offensive line lived within the beltway of Cincinnati. And that was something to brag about, because they're all good kids from Moeller and LaSalle and St. X and all these places, Northern Kentucky with Cov Cath. We had good representation from players from around the area, and it became then started to become much more of a homegrown football team that we were trying to build there. Same thing Luke's doing right now. He doesn't get too far away from home and getting enough guys to say yes.
Well, because I think the big key is here, the Cincinnati area has great high school football from St. X, Elder, Colerain, Lakota
Sure.
West. If you could recruit that, you could be highly successful, I think, with any program. And it's the same thing Miami University did with Howard Schnellenberger back in the mid 70s, late 70s, where he turned it around by just getting the best players from the city of Miami.
Yeah, they called it the state of Miami back in his sales pitches. I used to always try to sell the local guys on saying, listen, I believe in the value of going off to college. I just don't think you have to leave town to do it. And I made a big explanation about that to the player and to the parents. I wanted the kid to have the experience literally of driving away, going over to school. The good news was he's 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes away. But I wanted, particularly early on, not to be running back and forth to home and all those types of things. But it was a benefit if they needed to. So we really tried to sell the independence of a kid leaving home, but he just might leave home for 10. I always ask him, how far down the road do you have to go to say, hey, I've gone off to college, or I'm staying more locally? And it's a fine answer. I mean, whether you're an hour away, or 2 hours away, or 10 minutes away, you've left home, you walked off that front porch, and you're now under somebody else's direction for a while. That's going off to college. And we sold the locals on doing that. And then, of course, you switch gears and sell it opposite if you're going to Florida to try to recruit, right? That you only get one chance in life to go somewhere else and do something different, blah, blah, blah. So you got to be a great salesperson at whatever your clients are trying to do. But no, we enjoyed it. It was a fun build. We had our highs and our lows. We had some big wins. We beat Wisconsin that year. We beat Wisconsin and took Ohio State to the wire in the same year, and yet we're not capable of winning a conference game. That is how up and down our team was. That particular 99 season, we couldn't put the ball through the uprights, even with young Jonathan Ruffin. And then by the same token, the next 2 or 3 years, he could have won the Groza every year. And he did win it the next year, 2000. So we had a plethora of good coaches come through there. We had a tremendous amount of good young kids come through there. And thank goodness for social media today allows you to stay in touch with these guys now. One this past weekend was in Nashville. Look me up. A month ago, Jason Fabini was in Nashville. We got together for coffee. I'm letting them know I'm here if they need me. I'm friends with tons of them now on Facebook, as I am almost all my stops, but no more so than Cincinnati, because you stay 10 years. You know, the reason you get into coaching is to have a positive influence on someone else's life and build something unique and special that they couldn't do otherwise. And we felt like we did that. The intrinsic values that come out of being a coach are the lifetime friendships and the rewards you get when a kid calls you up or writes you and says, "Coach, thank you. I didn't know what you were trying to do to me at that time. Now that I'm a dad, a father, a coach, a worker, a husband, I now know what you were talking about." So that's how we get our rewards in coaching, is when people come back and say thanks, because they're too young and dumb, so to speak, to notice it while they're going through it.
Yeah, everybody under this age of 30 is dumb. It seems like that age keeps extending each year, too. So I went on YouTube today, because you can find everything on there, and I pulled up the 1999 Cincinnati-Wisconsin game.
Yeah.
And I went back and I watched a lot of that game. And the thing that surprised me, because I'd forgotten about it, I mean, you've got, when they show your coordinators and your assistant coaches up in the booth, hell, we got Mike Tomlin sitting down from Jimbo Fisher. And that 99 game, Ron Dane, I mean, I think he broke the Big Ten rushing record against you guys, ran for over 200 yards. But your defense played great. And the thing that struck me was the defensive game plan you used, because you had a lot of stunning, because Wisconsin had a huge offensive line. You guys were probably undersized D-line. But the way you guys forced pressure there and caused those turnovers, I thought was brilliant.
Well, Mike, every time you play a game, whether I'm a coordinator or a head coach, you try to lay out a plan for how you're going to win a game. And how you win one game is not necessarily how you play the next game. And I won't ever forget that Friday night when I sit there, and I always talk to my guys on Friday night, and I listened to a DeJuan Gossett YouTube a Q&A he had a couple weeks ago. So all these players reflect back on my Friday night was more sermon-like. It really was. I mean, I talked from the heart. I quoted. We talked about building character and family values and things that would benefit them in life. And I touched on the game, but of course we've been touching on it all week. The Wisconsin game, I touched on it a little bit longer. And I told the guys, kind of like reading your fortune. I said, guys, here's how we're going to win the game tomorrow. Now, just everybody needs to be on the same page here. Offense and defense and kicking. And this is the way you do it all the time, whether it's Tuesday night or a Friday night meeting. But I said, listen, defense, you need to understand our offense will struggle. This is the Big Ten football team, and they know what they're doing. And I looked at Robert Cooper, the young tailback. I said, Coop, I need one big X play out of you. Okay, you got to break one, because we're not going to be able, fellas, defense, hear me out. We're not going to be able to grind it on these guys. You're not going to just whip Wisconsin up and down the field just because we say we're Bearcats. And I said, they got some good players too. So we're going to be a feast or famine on offense. They're going to sack us. They're going to stop our run game, but we have to hit some explosive plays and stay in the game. And on defense, and I told the offense, I said, listen, guys, you're going to get impatient sitting over on the sideline saying, come on, defense, what the heck's wrong? Because I think both sides need to be educated on how you're going to play the game. I said, we're going to play a little bit of rope-a-dope against these guys. It's a little bit of a bend, don't break. And we're going to tackle Ron Dane. He's going to get his yards, fellas. I said, guys, he might get 200 yards on us. But that doesn't mean he has to score. And the way the game play, I looked at our punter. I said, man, oil your leg up, dude, because you're going to punt the ball 8 or 9 times tomorrow. I'm just telling you right now. So I'm telling the whole team, this is what's going to happen, and believe it when it starts unfolding, because if you don't educate your team like that, an offensive crew could sit over on the sideline and get impatient with the defense that just keeps giving up first downs, and vice versa. When the defense is over there, here goes another 3 and out, and a 3 and out, and a 3 and out, and they can kind of wear on each other if you're not on top of that. So you're truly educating the guys on how we're going to play, how we're going to win the game. And you had to call on your specialist. Our punter punted great, but he did punt like 8 or 9 times, if I had to recall. And we went out there and we forced a turnover, and we kicked a winning, what turned out to be the winning field goal from Jonathan Ruffin as a true freshman. Later on, he went in the tank. Okay, couldn't hit anything the rest of '99. Then he came back, won the Groves of the next year, but he did hit that key one against. They turned the ball over, and we got the field goal on what? A 3 and out. We didn't make any yards. We just held and didn't turn it over and kicked the field goal. They turned it over, we turned it over. They got it on about the 10 or 15-yard line. And fumbled going in. I mean, this Ron Dane's walking in the end zone of this gaping hole, and Jeff Burrow, a guy that I've later coached with many a time, punches the ball out, and we get it in the end zone. Another drive, Ron Dane takes the ball all the way down the field. He gets first and goal on the 9. He takes an off tackle and goes, and somebody knifes through there and tackles him on the 3, but it hurts his ankle. I mean, they just cut his legs out from under him. He's like a Mack truck. He's about 260 pounds. He goes limping off, and here comes the backup, and Mario Mons knifes through, keeps them in the backfield. And they end up on that sequence of having first and goal on the 9, taking 3 instead of getting a touchdown. And that's how we had to play the game. And so it turned out to be a 17-12 score with about 6 minutes to play, 5.5, 6 minutes to play, maybe 7 even. And the minute I saw them, Mike, huddle up, come out, get down their stances, hand the ball to Ron Dane or Eddie, I'm thinking, okay, this is good. They think they're going to just ram this thing down our throat methodically all the way to the end and not let our offense back on the field. And they kept huddling, and I kept watching the clock. They kept huddling, and I kept watching the clock. And sure enough, they wasted too much time. They should have been in a hurry-up mode no matter what, but they just felt they could just do it just right. And when they got the ball down close to the 20, they're running out of time now. And so they have to start throwing the ball, and setting from my vantage point on the press box side of the field, their right tackle flinched just ever so slightly, and they knifed a skinny post into the end zone for a touchdown. They got negated, of course, on the foul.
That was a great throw, by the way.
Oh, it was really. I mean, we had played pretty good all day, but that was a good throw and a good catch, and we were just about to be beat, perhaps. But the guy moved. Barry Alvarez will swear on his grave to this day, because I know Barry real well, that guy did not move, and these were Conference USA officials, okay? So we got that thing knifed out, and then all of a sudden they throw a couple more times in the end zone, and we knock them down on 4th down because they now have exhausted, and we had a 5-point lead rather than 3 or less, and so they had to score the touchdown, and we knew it, and it turns out to be the biggest win in history of the school at that particular juncture, beating a top 10, a number 8 ranked team at our house. And we go up the next week, play Ohio State. Okay, and we put about 500 on them. We get beat, like 35, 20 something. We just got outmatched a little bit with their offense. But ironically, that game that we played against Ohio State, and we looked good on offense. We just couldn't score enough, and we were outmanned, but we looked good. I mean, we looked like a really good offense. And Jimbo was calling the plays, of course. Now, fast forward at 6 weeks, 7 weeks, our season's over. Nick Saban leaves Michigan State and goes to LSU, gets the job down there. The story has it, he sends a plane down up to Lansing and say, fellas, at 5 o'clock, there's going to be a plane land up there. Anybody that wants to get on that plane has got a job with me at LSU. Talking about his whole staff. I think a GA named Sean McVay was about the only kid who got on it, okay? No assistant coach got on the plane. It tells you a little bit about, what it's like working for Nick, particularly when they named Bobby Williams the new head coach, because life was going to be a whole lot more fun and easy not being around Nick. So he goes to LSU now seeking a whole staff. Got to start from scratch. And what a good head coach will always do is he'll always have a list, going for himself that he can at least be pointed in the right direction. So Nick is telling me this story when he's calling me in December of '99. I was out recruiting. We weren't going anywhere, of course, because we won 2 or 3 games, with Wisconsin being one of them. And he tells me this story. And I said, well, how did you come about, Jimbo? And he told me the story. He says, hey, I watched your Ohio State game. And when I saw how impressive you guys were moving the ball on these guys, I wrote down Jimbo Fisher's name just on my sheet that I always keep of guys just in case, or guys I might want to talk to someday. And he said, I'm asking permission to talk to Jimbo and bring him down for an interview. What can you tell me about him? That's how that conversation went. And I told him Jimbo's strengths, Jimbo's weaknesses, and he goes down there, takes the job. And that's, of course, a great move in his career. He stayed with Nick through 5. They won a title. Nick took off to the Dolphins and the pros. He stayed behind, worked for Les Miles, won another title. And then eventually Jimbo went to Florida State with that head coach in waiting title under Bobby Bowden. And that pushed Bobby out the door a little bit quicker than Bobby was wanting to go. And then he stayed there 8 years, won a title. And then the AD, who was a young administrator at LSU, when he was at LSU, went full circle and become an AD, and he lured Jimbo from Florida State over to A&M. Now, in the rumors, that's the same AD now who's at LSU again. And the rumors had it early 2 weeks ago where they're going to reach out and try to steal Jimbo away from, Texas A&M. But Jimbo's just one of the many guys that we've had, on our staff at Cincinnati that I knew I picked the right guys. But you know when you do that, you're not going to have them very long, particularly when you're just a real mid-major job. You can't compete with the salary ranges that the Power Fives, or what's now the Power Fives, were offering. Jimbo was a one and done, and then his career. But, oddly enough, whenever I got fired at Cincinnati, do you know who Bob Goen was? Who was on Bob's first list? First on the list was Jimbo Fisher. He'd been at LSU. I get fired, in 03. They win the title in 02. It would have been a nice, plum hire for UC, pulling the national championship coordinator out there. And Jimbo and I talked. And for whatever reason, I didn't try to influence him one way or the other, just tell him the facts that I felt. He stayed. Of course, his career's turned out real good, about 100 million reasons why. And, but by the same token, if you just look at the history that UC did, no, they didn't get Jimbo, but they got a hardworking Mark D'Antonio who kind of put the program on a good solid path for BK to come in and take over and take it all the way to the hilt. And he went to the mountaintop in his second, third years, and then he took a great job in Notre Dame. So,
all right. So when you look at this UC team today, it has to give you great pleasure that you had something to do with getting us there, number one. Number two, do you think there's any way the college football selection committee will let them into the Final Four?
Here's my personal feeling. I'm pulling for them like crazy. And I love the Bearcats. For the first 2 or 3 years post being fired, I was that angry guy who went off and coached other places. I coached at South Carolina for Lou for the last time, went back to Notre Dame again, coached for Charlie Weiss. And then I was fired after the second year there when we won 9 or 10 games. And so I came back to Cincinnati and lived for, with a special person for a little while. And it was at that time that Brian took over. BK had just taken over in December, and he hired my son Jesse to be a GA for him in the spring of 08. And Brian is the guy who got me back involved. I mean, we talk as friends now, but he got me back involved. He made me forget all about the past. And when I came back around, I did feel it from some of the, mutual friends and fans of, hey, coach, thanks for what you did, because you abruptly leave when you get fired. So this was 3 years later. You were getting some of the pats on the back for what you did do in the foundation you did lay, and what Brian and D'Antonio had been able to get done. Actually, it would have been about 4 years later. And so Bob Goen was gone, Nancy Zimpher was gone, all the culprits who let me go weren't there anymore. So all I had to do is come in and introduce myself. And so I got back involved a little bit. Since then, I've been following the Bearcats with great earnest and excitement. No more so than what Luke has been able to do. I mean, like I said, I'm friends with Tommy. I didn't know Butch that well, but we had, when I was with the Eagles 13, 14, 15, we had 4 Bearcats. I mean, that's unbelievable. 4 kids from one college program on a 53-man roster. You had Trent Cole, Brent Selleck that I recruited myself, and then you had Connor Barwin and Jason Kelsey, who later D'Antonio recruited. But all of them were great pros. All of them were high character. All of them were the same kind of guys you would aspire to have at University of Cincinnati. So I felt good about that. And then, so no, I was right now, UC is number 2 right now, more so on what they did last year. Okay. And the fact that they were already in the party this year. They finished the last year in the top 10. That was the year they made their push. They could have easily been in the playoffs last year talent-wise because they took Georgia to the hilt. Outside of a 3rd and 2 play, they probably should have ran the ball. They would have beat them. And but so now they're there. You've made your mark. You made everybody sit up and pay attention after last year's team. Like you look at Wake and you look at some of Michigan State. You just look at some of these teams. They're undefeated, but they're not number 2, and yet they're in power conferences. Okay. But UC's schedule laid out perfectly for them this year. They had a lot of characters back from last year, Dustin Ritter and the like, and they found themselves ranked high to begin with. And then they had those 2, what initially was really marquee teams. IU hasn't quite performed as well. Notre Dame is still undefeated since UC. And you go into the house up at that Rockne built up there and put on a pretty good show at Notre Dame. So it got everybody's attention that they do need to stay there. They followed it with some 50-point blowouts. Okay, kept everybody's attention. And it's a little bit of what's happened around them that's allowed them to also creep up there. Are they the number 2 best team in the country? They're ranked that way. Who knows if they are? The team, but now back to your question, are they going to be in a 14 playoff? The best thing to happen to UC football was when Alabama got beat. Okay, just they went down, tough environment down in College Station, and they just didn't get the job done. They might still be the better team than A&M. They just didn't get it done on that night. Since they've got 1 loss, they're going to probably end up playing Georgia in the SEC title game. And I've seen Georgia on defense many a time down here because I'm working with my son down here now at Vanderbilt, being kind of an analyst. So I watch a lot of SEC tape. And I think Georgia can beat Alabama. If they do, that knocks Alabama out. Oklahoma, the schools they have to be aware of to bump them is Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Alabama. In other words, 2 of them could get in there with UC, but if all 3 of them get in with Georgia, because if Alabama beats Georgia, they're both in. I don't care what UC says. They win.
That's where you got a problem.
Okay. Oklahoma is getting by the skin of their teeth every week, and they may not win out. But they still got some tough games down there with Iowa State and Baylor, who's playing really well defensively. And then whoever they end up playing in the title game, they'd have to beat maybe somebody else again. They're capable with ineffectiveness at times at quarterback to lose a game. Ohio State's the team I still say is going to be in the playoffs. Now, UC might be in the playoffs too, but I think Ohio State's going to be there because they're peaking at the right time. They've got the most to gain with the remaining schedule. Almost every team they have left is a ranked team right now. UC plays 1 ranked team. If you truly went on the strength of schedule, a group of 5 team will never make it. This year with UC having played Notre Dame, that helps them. IU doesn't help them as much. But if they win impressively, and they kind of won the hearts of people, I mean, I think that's as much as anything, but that's based on last year's showing against Georgia. It shows you that they do belong in that conversation. You could say, hey, there are a Big 12 team right now because when they get to the Big 12, they will compete instantly, okay? So you almost look at UC now as no longer just a group of 5, even though they are for another year or two. They almost have that tag already of being a Power 5, and that kind of gives them I think last week's voting was critical, okay? Yeah. They went over and played an average game against Navy. But all the coaches know, and I think the press knows, whenever you play a military academy, knowing that what they do is hard functionally and structurally, you get a mulligan, a little bit of a mulligan. Oklahoma got penalized big by by winning close to Kansas, and UC did not get penalized at all by winning a tough game on the road in Annapolis, because it is a tough place to play over there with that option. So if Oklahoma wins out, Kentucky or Ohio State wins out, and Alabama beats Georgia, you've got some real arguments coming. If Oklahoma stumbles, I think UC's in. If Alabama gets beat, I think UC's in. Oregon is the team out there you still got to kind of keep your eyes on, because their only win was against, not the only win, but the marquee win was against Ohio State. So they've had to claw their way back. But I'll be glad when it's an expanded playoff. This is a good reason why we ought to have an expanded playoff, more than just 4 teams. But I really do think the gods are going to look favorably upon UC. They've earned it. Nobody be giving them anything. But they do need to be impressive. And when they play SMU, the lone ranked team left, they need to show something.
They need SMU to win until that point, too.
That's right.
To win after that point.
That's right.
And Notre Dame winning would be huge also.
Well, what you got to realize, Sonny Dykes' name now is hot out at Texas Tech. So you got to hope that he stays focused to the task and runs the table, other than UC beating them, for they'll get a nice coach out there. That's where his dad coached for 15 years. But I think UC's in pretty good shape. But there is something to be said about strength of schedule. I mean, I'm not naive to it. This is a little bit about my head and my heart. I can talk with my head. My heart says I want UC in the playoffs. I know Luke would love to have them in there. And I think if Alabama loses, I think they'll be in. If Ohio State wins out, they will be in. Now, the Big Ten could make it easy for UC, and they just kind of beat up on each other these last 3 or 4 matchups. But I don't see right now anybody beating Ohio State in the Buckeyes.
I don't think anybody in there, Michigan or Michigan State, has enough offense to compete with them.
No, they don't. So their chance of winning out, even though they're playing these top-ranked teams, is better than Oklahoma's chances of winning out.
Yeah.
And like I said, if Alabama just steps aside, and you could argue Alabama gets beat by Georgia by 2 points. Are they still not one of the top 2 or top 4 best teams in the country? Probably.
Yeah, but Coach, let me ask you this: they don't have a win at Alabama as good as beating Notre Dame at Notre Dame right now.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's the one thing UC does have. When you look at Ohio State, what's Ohio State's best win? Most of these teams' best wins does not stack up to beating Notre Dame at Notre Dame right now.
That's right. I think that's why they're still at 2, because their other games aren't going to be marquee matchups. Beating UCF and beating Temple and all these kind of schools is good, particularly when you just bury them by 50. And that's what they need. I mean, you don't like to use the slogan if you're the head coach, but I think style points do matter right now for UC, because they're the underdog of still getting in. But I think they're in good shape. If they just take care of business and let everything else run its course, then you just pray that everything works out. Because if Ohio State wins, they're going to be in, because they would have beaten 4 teams in the top 10.
Yeah.
And then Iowa. They would have beaten Iowa probably on the other side also. But they got their problems fixed. You got to give them credit for that. It cost them 1 game. And since then, they've been on fire. Oregon, while beating Ohio State, that's a marquee win with the defense playing terrible at Ohio State. They've got it fixed. Oregon has been kind of up and down. They've won some games, but not overly impressively. And I was more impressed with Oregon the day they played Ohio State than I have any game since they played Ohio State.
And the other problem is the Pac-12 maybe is just as bad as the AAC right now.
It is. They all can't stand prosperity. One of them has a big win. They can't follow it up with 2 in a row. And you can say what you want. UC 3 years ago beat UCLA back-to-back years at Cincinnati and out there. So people have to remember that when they start talking about UC and the power and the league they're in. All you can do is beat the team. I mean, when Brian Kelly played Oregon State, they beat them. So they've fared well against the and a Midwest team is always going to fare well against a Far West team because of toughness and physicality and the way people play the game. I mean, the Bearcats are in the mold of Luke Fickell, no question. But who is Luke Fickell? He is in the mode of Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer. Both of them are hard-nosed, physical, tough guys who like to play good defense and win the line of scrimmage. And if you win the line of scrimmage, every game, you got a chance to win every game.
Yeah, and I think that you talked about expanding the playoffs. I think it should be at least 8 teams. I don't see why you couldn't do 16 and end the season at the end of October and play the playoffs.
Yeah. I'm kind of anxious to see this 12 spot operate. I hope it goes to 12. I mean, 8 would be better, certainly, than 4. But I do believe that inclusion should be a part of it. I think that the best group of 5, whoever that would be by that time, should be in the playoffs. Okay, that means that's giving them a chance.
And if you look at college basketball, a lot of people didn't want it expanded in the early 80s or late 70s when it was 16 or 32 teams. But when you expanded it, then all of a sudden you had the Princetons of the world. You had the Loyola Chicago run to the Final Four. That's what turned March Madness into March Madness.
Yeah.
I think if you had 16 teams here and you included the smaller guys, I think that blows college football up even bigger than what it already is.
Well, I tell you what, if you just put the dollar signs in front of all that, then you would have a lot of takers, because that's what it's come down to now. We got to do what's not necessarily always what's best for the student athlete in some cases, but what's best for college football is to make as much money as possible. And football is driving the train right now of all things. I read a quote where Bob Huggins said the other day that he thinks that basically the Power 5 type conferences, or not the Power 5, but Division 1A, which is now football, that should be the 130 schools that cap themselves into being in the basketball tournament, and get rid of all the rest of them and let them go have their tournament somewhere else and be crowned just as neatly as the other one. You know, it's just like Division 1 football, Division 1 AA football. It's 2 different divisions. So I'd be for that, even though Cinderella lives because of all these other schools that get in there. You just never know. That's how Gonzaga was born, right? March Madness.
Oh, Xavier even. I mean, Xavier, their basketball program had never made an NCAA tournament until 1983. And since then, I mean, consistently, they've probably been more successful than Cincinnati even.
Yeah, I think way back in the old days, when 32, I think it was, invited, then it went to 48, then to 64. Each time they've increased it, it's just increased the madness and the upset.
It's increased the money, too.
Oh, heck yeah. So, I mean, everybody's benefited because it's all about revenue streams. And that's the thing I feel best for UC when they now go into the Big 12. They make $6 million a year revenue stream from AAC. Okay, that's just about the top dollar. $6 to $7 million a year gets put on John Cunningham's desk. Okay, do with it what you want. The minute they enter the Big 12, under current numbers, that's going to be closer to $30 million. And they can do so many more things for themselves, for the program, for the coaches in the programs, for the student athletes in the programs, because UC has typically been a cash-strapped program. I mean, I've been there. I've heard the other coaches talk about it. I talked to Mike Bond about it when he was the AD. It's just hard because Cincinnati, as fundraisers, gets hit by so many people out there. You know, your Notre Dame's, go for money there. UK goes for money there. Xavier goes for money. Miami of Ohio, Ohio State. They all pull on the donors and the givers out of the people of Cincinnati, much less the high schools, because what does it take for their kids to go to these private schools all over the place in Cincinnati is a burden to their families. So the revenue stream has always been an issue there, and getting into a Power 5. And that's what always separated Louisville from Cincinnati, not necessarily on the playing field all the time, but Louisville had a tremendous advantage over UC all these years, and most people don't even know why. And it's because the university absorbed all the athletic department's debt at the end of every year and made them whole. UC has to be totally free and independent with revenue in versus out. That's why Bob Goen always preached the balanced budget days. But that kept things down, even though we were a tight strap budget team. And now that, when Louisville, I thought the Big 12 made a mistake, 5 years ago. They should have grabbed Louisville and Cincinnati at the same time, put them in the Big 12. Then this Midwestern corridor would then have West Virginia and Louisville and Cincinnati and right into Iowa State and Kansas and all this. but it is what it is. Louisville got the nod. UC sat back, patiently waited. And now, how would you like to have a ticket to the Big 12 and you don't ever have to play Oklahoma or Texas?
Yeah, but in basketball, you will have to play Kansas, so that gets a little harder. So I think it helps both programs with that being done. And since we're going to talk about that, you brought him up. What was it like working with Bob Huggins on the same campus? Because he had been to a Final Four 2 years before you got there. He was highly successful. And really, it's hard. You don't find too many programs that are highly successful in both sports.
Yeah, Bob Huggins was a true ally. I mean, he loved football as a guy. He loved to tailgate, party, and do all those things. He supported our program. Bob and I got along great. He pulled for us to be good because, if you bring a basketball recruit in during the fall of a football home game for recruiting weekend, you'd like to see him go over there and be a part of a fun stadium atmosphere. And when we would bring guys in on our recruiting weekends, back then more in January and December, we'd always centered around a home basketball game if we could, because the shoe was rocking when Hugs was there all the time. So it can coexist and co-function. But when you go back and look at the challenges of our football program to get it up off the ground and get it rolling, the football coaches there that are there today didn't have quite the UC basketball success to contend with. And it seems that more of the football coaches that have been there in the last 3 or 4 go-rounds, didn't have to answer to some of the administration that we had to answer to. So it was a little bit of a catch-22. There were challenges built into that, but all in all, it's a good place. I do think basketball and football can coexist. And with Luke Fickell, I mean, he's king of the hill right now. Couldn't be more happy for him. The pendulum in these kind of schools has swung to the fact that mostly football drives the train now and basketball's along for the ride versus the other way around when we were there. I mean, when we, one of the bigger things in our program was us getting bowl eligible in 97, and we basically had to buy our way. There was one bowl game out there still left, probably about 6 schools vying for it because the number of bowl games wasn't as high as it is today.
Yeah.
And that was the Humanitarian Bowl. And give Bob credit, he went out there and bargained and bought us into that game. Now, what did it cost us? Well, it cost us money, okay? And that's okay. You'd be willing to pay money to go play a bowl game. If that's all it took was money, you could come up with it somehow. But we also owed Boise State a home basketball game out there. Now, that was written in a contract. And do you think Bob Huggins was really over-thrilled about going to Boise, Idaho and playing basketball?
I'm guessing
no, he
not.
wasn't. But he did, kind of took one for the team, so to speak, and he went out there, and I'm sure he beat them. But that's what it took for us, and then that thing propelled us a little bit. Then we slid back, 98, 99, didn't have quite the team because we lost an NFL-type team, really, in 97. We had 5 players drafted, third highest total in the whole country that year of players picked off of one football team. And then 2000, 2001, 2002, we rallied, got back into the 7-win column and went to bowl games all 3 years. Probably something that undid me a little bit was the fact we didn't win those 3 bowl games. We're playing opponents that we should win and compete against, North Texas, Marshall, whoever else we played there. But anyway, that's all water under the dam. But we went to 4 bowl games. We had 6 out of 10 seasons as winning seasons. So we did set a little bit of a platform and something to work with. We got invited into the Big East, so the other coaches took advantage. Bob had seen the vision of our facility lacking and put that all together in Varsity Village, and that's been a big bonanza for all the coaches to follow. And now they're even thinking about building a standalone football facility just down the street, a couple blocks off campus there for the football team, and that's something sorely needed. Whenever they built the Lindner Center, it's really nice, it's impressive, it's great, but it doesn't do anything for football when it comes to winning the recruiting battles of facilities matter. Okay, they improved the downstairs portion, the locker room, the weight room. Coaches' offices were just bland and average as pie. But if they go get themselves a standalone facility, all these kids who come on campus that are going to Louisville and going to all these other now big time places, your facilities play a role in that. And so that's why I think once they get new facilities even more, and get into the Big 12, their net can expand a little bit, and the type of players, while they've got good ones, can even continue to rise and compete more and more. If if you're sitting in the state of Ohio, which Luke recruits it tremendously, and Ohio State has helped that a little bit because they backed off the state of Ohio. They used to sign 12, 18 guys a year, and now it's like 8 to 10 guys a year. Where are those other 10 guys going? That might have been an Ohio State type look to begin with. They're going to that's how Mark Stoops has got his program going. He's got 35 players on his roster from the state of Ohio, and those guys have really paid off for him. So Luke's benefited that by getting some of those kind of guys. But when he goes to compete against Minnesota and Michigan State and Indiana, Purdue, all those things with the Big 12 banner sitting there, they'll be equal to anybody and everybody, and they'll win a lot of those recruiting battles.
Yeah, especially after this season, especially if they can get in that Final Four. Do you think Fickell goes anywhere? I know this is pure conjecture, and nobody knows, but
no, I don't think Luke goes. Number one, you got to know him and his wife Amy. They're great people. They're tremendous family-oriented people. They're tremendous Catholic family, and there's not a better city in the country if you're a Catholic and you love football and you're happy with your family. It's a great place to live, great place to be. That whole tri-state area. It's very family-oriented. His kids are embedded up there in the northeast side of town with the Indian Hill / Moeller, whatever, wherever they send them to school. He's got his own kid playing for him now. And he made the right choice. I mean, you look at the things he's turned down, particularly the Michigan State job 2 years ago. That was handpicked now. That's D'Antonio's relationship with Luke Fickell is the same as Luke Fickell was to Marcus Freeman. Yeah. Okay, they're the same. They were connected at the hip, player, coach, stayed great friends and mentors. And Dino would have been extremely happy to see Luke Fickell come take over the job that he, really built and maintained it for a dozen years. And he said no. Okay. And then the pandemic came. So it made it better that he be at UC during the pandemic for familiarity, good team, et cetera. And then he stays again this year. And so it worked out great. And now they're going to the Big 12. So if he says, well, I've just wanted to be in a Power 5 conference somewhere along the way, he's now going to have that. He's going to get paid well. Same thing. That $30 million coming in there allows you to pay your head coach what he deserves of his peers that are in the Power 5 conferences. So I don't really see him going anywhere. He's never coached anywhere outside the state of Ohio. I can see him staying there a long time. He'll always have his eye on the Ohio State job if Ryan decides to do something drastically. But I think he's a good fit for that job. I think, Luke certainly would have been, but Ryan's taking advantage of being there at the right time, right place. He's a great offensive mind, and he's doing a tremendous job up there. And I think they'll be in the playoffs, and I hope UC's in the playoffs. And who knows, maybe they get to match up somewhere in that math.
Be a nice national championship game, Coach.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, Georgia found out last year they could be, they've got a good team. I've seen them play. We played them right here at Vanderbilt. We got hammered naturally, but Kirby has just 5 years on the job. This is the pinnacle of his efforts. Every kid on that team is his. He's developed every single one of them. They're playing his style of ball. They got a good friend of mine running the offense now, and Todd Monken does a really nice job. They're not a dynamic quarterback team like Alabama has been more recently. I don't think Kirby ever turned the page to get on offense the way Nick has gone toward offense. I mean, Nick is a true believer in now outscoring people. And he is a defensive guy, but he believes you need to score 45 and 50 points every game to ensure victory because he's had his hands full along the way with some of these great athletic quarterbacks.
Yeah. All right, Coach. We're going to wrap it up, but I would like to have you back maybe in a couple of weeks. We could talk a little bit more UC, talk about your time in the NFL. I know you got to coach on staff with your son a few years ago, and I would like to have that conversation with you also if you're interested.
Absolutely.
It was an absolute pleasure having you on today. I think highly of you. I remember what this program was when I was a kid. You'd go to Nippert, and there'd be like 3,000 people in the stands.
When I took the job, some of these guys came up to me, some of these old timers, to be honest with you, Some of them may have passed on since, but they said, Coach, I know you were at Notre Dame, but don't you see our facilities? Because Nipper just had that first little facelift done,
Yeah.
after it was condemned. He says, don't you just think our facilities are like some of the best in the country? And I couldn't say, I didn't want to put them down, but those guys had not been anywhere. And now look at that place. I mean, it is really, really impressive. I'm going to be up there hopefully next Saturday on the 6th watching the homecoming game. But just that press box, the way it's tucked into the campus now, it's got a great echoing effect because it's surrounded by height and buildings, and they pack people in there, and they're all excited. The Bearcats are winning. They haven't lost a home game in a long time. And so no, it's a great place to be. I'm so happy that they've arrived, so to speak, and taken full advantage of the things offered in Cincinnati and the Midwest in general. They're good kids up there. They work hard. They're fun to watch play. Wish Luke nothing but the best.
All right, Coach. It was great to have you on the show today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Good job. Enjoyed it.
All right, guys. I want to remind you, follow us at Grueling Truth on Twitter. And you can check us out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, over 300 different outlets. You can see or hear this podcast. So for now, for Rick Minner, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends